Hello and welcome to In the Classroom, an educational podcast making teaching and learning more transparent. My name is Benjamin Stewart at benjaminlstewart.org. Today I want to talk about transitioning from an academic writing class where a literature review was developed and then taking that literature review into a thesis seminar course where perhaps that same literature review might work in terms of a study that is really in line with common research questions, purpose, the overall argument of the literature review. I think this is important because I see a lot of students who are coming into Thesis Seminar, which is an 8th semester course, after having taken a 7th semester academic writing course. And sometimes the literature review as it is not maybe exactly the way it ends up at the end of the Thesis Seminar course. And I want to give some examples of what I mean and give some ideas about how you might want to approach the first few days as you get into Thesis Seminar and you're thinking about the literature review that you have already developed in many cases. So when you're starting Thesis Seminar, a lot of times students will come in with having spent weeks developing a literature review. And, sometimes the literature review is very much in line with the practicalities of the actual research that they end up doing in Thesis Seminar. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. There are some cases where students will spend several weeks developing a literature review in 7th semester, only to decide then that it's a topic that they really don't want to do their research about. Maybe it's just a topic that they've exhausted and they've really determined that they would rather write about something else. They would prefer to conduct different types of research. And that is certainly acceptable. We have 6 weeks to develop a literature review in Thesis Seminar. So we have a lot of time to think about and write about an idea from scratch, essentially. So there's nothing wrong with finishing an academic writing course and then saying, you know what, I'm going to change and develop a new literature review for the Thesis Seminar course. There are other situations where maybe the literature review is complete and maybe the topic is still something that the student wants to pursue, but there still needs to be some changes that need to be addressed in the literature review. And so that is certainly another possible situation. If you look at the schedule for the first week of Thesis Seminar, all of the sessions are whole group discussions, and most of the topics that we discuss are going to be about how to narrow down your topic, how to organize your argument for your literature review, how to develop a thesis statement, what the overall purpose of your study is. And at the same time, we're going to be talking about some of the practicalities of doing your own research. For example, who are your possible participants? Which schools might you pursue to try to collect your data? What kind of permissions will you need from either the teacher, from the school, from the parents, depending on the purpose of your study? These are some of the things you're going to need to think about when you're looking at your literature review to see whether or not your literature review is going to be directly aligned with the method section of your study. Right? Again, collecting information from your participants. Are you going to use questionnaires? Are you going to interview your participants? And so on. Another thing you need to think about when you're developing your literature review, or you're trying to find a way to align your literature review with your study, is to always make sure that you can find at least 2 to 3 studies in the literature that very much relate and are pretty much the same as what you want to do. It's perfectly acceptable. In fact, I would encourage all of you to try to replicate studies that already exist. Sometimes students get confused with the idea of plagiarism with replicating a study, and those are two different things. We don't want to plagiarize or steal someone else's ideas as our own. We don't want to do that, but we do want to try to replicate other studies so that we can add to the current literature and provide more context to the particular problem that we're pursuing as we're trying to find answers, and we're basically designing the way in which we collect the data and analyze the data. And, in some cases, we might even be using the same instruments to collect the data. Maybe it's the same questionnaire. Maybe it's the same survey. Maybe it's the same procedure in the way in which we collect the data. Those are all very much aspects of a study that we want to try to replicate based on current literature. So always keep that in mind. And this might be something that you thought about last semester and 7th semester when you're developing your literature review and academic writing, or perhaps not. And this might be where there's an opportunity to maybe dig a little bit deeper to find 1 or 2, perhaps 3 studies that very much relate to what you're doing. Now, this does not mean that you need to have only all studies exactly the same as what you're doing, right? There might be times where you're developing a qualitative research, but you have a lot of quantitative studies in your literature review to support your overall argument, and that's perfectly acceptable. Nothing wrong with that. But again, try to find at least, I would say, 2 to 3 studies that very much relate and link to your study in terms of how you want to collect and analyze your data. This will just give you ideas as well. This will help you to produce a more sound study because someone else has already gone through that process. So really keep that in mind whenever you're thinking about your literature review. Start thinking about your participants. Start thinking about the students, the teachers, the administrators, maybe even the parents, depending on your purpose. But who are your participants going to be? And start reaching out to them to see if there are if it's a possibility. If you need certain permissions, reaching out to them saying, hey, in a month, 6 weeks from now, I'm going to be needing to collect data. Is it all right if I, use or observe some of your teachers, students, all right, to conduct my study? Sometimes some schools will require certain permissions, and so knowing that from the very beginning of the course is going to help you plan ahead so that you can get those permissions, get them in place, get all the signatures complete so that you can begin collecting your data at the specific time. So as you begin Thesis Seminar and you're transitioning from academic writing, maybe from a literature review that you've already developed, try to keep an open mind. This first week, we're going to be spending a lot of time not only in trying to narrow down our topic and talk about our thesis statement and so on, but at the same time, I'm going to be asking you questions like, who are your possible participants? Which schools are you considering? Have you spoken to them yet to get permission? Is it possible for you to do that? What kind of classes exist there? How will those types of classes help you, right, in your own study? These are the conversations we're going to be having. Not that you necessarily need to have all of the answers at this point, but you certainly need to have an idea of who your participants might be so that you know whether or not you're going to be able to conduct this study. This has been In the Classroom, an educational podcast making teaching and learning more transparent. Thanks for listening.